welcome to everyone. We're happy you're here. My name is Mara. I work for Siemens Stiftung, which means foundation in German, and I'm leading the e-mobility program. And yeah, I'm happy to invite to have you here for our practitioners webinar on electric mobility. So I will give some short introduction, and then we have Valerie from Ghana and Omondi from Kenya as our speakers. As you might now know, Siemens Stiftung is a non-profit foundation registered in Germany, and we support projects in education, culture, and in social ventures. And the team here, like mostly you all as well, are interested in electric mobility. And our social venture program in electric mobility is focusing on financial, non-financial, and ecosystem support. And well, maybe you now ask yourself, what is ecosystem support? And it's actually one part of it is what we are actually doing at the moment. So we believe that sharing data and sharing knowledge in new nascent sectors like electric mobility is really important, because it's always good to make mistakes and then learn from them. But we believe as well that maybe some learnings or some failures only should happen once. So that's why you have two experts for testing business models, testing applications in the market here that will present briefly, and then we will have quite some time for question and answer, because I'm sure that many of you come actually from the same area and might be interesting in really asking as well and learning more in depth than the presentation. For housekeeping, we will have question and answer in the end as said. So please ask your question in the question and answer box that you can find on the bottom of your screen. That will make it a lot easier for us and for the discussion participants to see your question as well, to follow it and to have it as well replied. You're happy to use the chat if you want to contact other participants, or if you want to share anything more general. We're trying to monitor the chat as well, but as said, we can't promise. So in like setting the scene for today a bit, we at Siemens Foundation, we work with social enterprises. So we give grants, sometimes as well other funding or support. But we do have as well, let's say, a bit more operative project wing. What does that mean? So it means that together with other third funding partners, for example, in Kenya, we worked with partnerships for the goals, P4G, and as well with the German Development Corporation, GIZ, in testing business models, getting data, and our implementing partner was Veto, where Mondi is speaking from. But of course, many other social ventures, many other ecosystem players were part of that project as well. In Ghana, there's a project that is funded under the International Climate Initiative by the German Ministry of Environment. And Impact Hub Accra is our partner there. And again, the project has a strong component on getting the right product market fit, developing in this case, electric cargo bikes that can really support to the transport or energy transition there. And Valerie Labi will present on early findings and learnings from that project. So you see both like together with partners to accelerate impact, but as well as Siemens Foundation, for us it's really important, support social ventures, get those data, as well. Not always everything is going as planned. I think that's maybe some of the learnings, or maybe sometimes can be as well just surprising that some of the learnings you can hear from today, but as well really nice to see if it actually works and you have like real clients using the bikes, using the vehicles, because it's kind of, I think, both for the ventures that produce the vehicles, but as well for us as a funder, it's kind of like a success as well to see, okay, like in the end it's working, or we can make it work. But yeah, so that's enough from my side, because as said, we have two expert speakers here. And I want to start to introduce you to Valerie. So Valerie is the co-founder and CEO of Cargo Bikes Africa, and she's presenting today as the business development specialist working with Impact Hub in Accra in Ghana. As said, she's working in the project that's co-funded by Siemens Foundation and the International Climate Initiative. And she will tell you about her experience in electric mobility, but as well kind of as a serial co-founder, I think, in her presentation. In 2018, she completed her master's degree in sustainability leadership in Cambridge and has been awarded in 2020 with the Global Engineering Outstanding Professional Award and the Mandela Washington Fellowship for Young African Leaders in 2014. So Valerie, I'm really excited for your presentation, and yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mara. Okay, so if you could stop sharing, then I'll just share.
Yusuf, can you stop sharing the screen?
Great. Brilliant. Just share my screen. Let me know if you can see my slides.
Yes, we can.
Brilliant. Yes, well, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Mara. So as she said, my name is Valerie Abena Konyo Labi Gundu Saptana the First, and I'm the co-founder of Cargo Bikes. But for today, I will be presenting on behalf of Impact Hub Accra, sharing our journey designing an e-cargo bike for Ghana as part of a project funded by the German Federal Ministry for Environment, Nature, Conservation, and Nuclear Safety. So when we're talking about designing business models, everything really starts from what we call the problem statement. So in our case, the problem statement is I would say, illustrated by this picture. In this picture, please meet Amina. She is living in Tamale in the northern region of Ghana. And typically on a daily basis, she spends around 3 hours a day carrying loads from home to farm to market. So we thought, how might we understand user needs and design to context an e-mobility solution that would enhance the productivity of last mile distribution in both rural and urban Ghana? And how do we go about that? So our approach was really to embrace what we call human-centered design thinking. And that really starts with having a deep understanding of what users want, aspire to have, understanding their pain points and barriers, and looking at designing the business model through 3 lenses. So the first one is what we call desirability. So understanding, what do people actually want from their mobility solution? The second one is feasibility. So what is technically possible to actually create and build in country, and understand supply chains and the costs around that. And then finally, viability. What is the business model that's going to pull all of these things together? And there are a number of other nexuses in these 3 lenses. So thinking about brand, functionality, and then also process. And all of these come together to really build what we call a premium customer experience. Because when you're designing for the business, you really need to think about, what is the behavior that you want to be changing? And what is the experience that you want customers to be having? So for us, we really started our journey understanding desirability over the last kind of 3 to 6 months, talking to hundreds of people across Ghana, just talking to them, trying to understand, what current mobility modes do you use? How much do you spend on transport? What do you carry? How far do you carry it? What are the challenges that you have? And if you were going to have an improved experience, what experience would you be looking for? And what we discovered were a number of insights, and I'm going to share with you 3 personas that we developed from all the research and the discussions and conversations that we've been having. And so the first one, meet Samira. She's based in the rural community. She's a shear collector and a farmer. She's been collecting shear nuts since she was a child, walking with her mum. Her responsibilities in terms of collecting also includes, she collects water, she collects firewood, farm produce, and then she travels between farm to home to market. She typically spends around 3 hours a day walking. Her husband owns a bike, but she was worried that if she uses the bike, what happens if it breaks? So who will fix it? She's tired of carrying heavy loads because it's weighing on her body. But at harvest, she typically comes together with other women in her community to move farm produce to market using a motor king or a tuk-tuk. She wishes to have access to a bike as and when she needs one. And she's never heard of e-mobility, but is aware of solar power. She's part of a Susu group, and this is her means of managing finance and managing her assets and how she gets information. So moving on from Samira, the second persona I wanted to share with you is Daniel. Daniel's experience is a little bit different. He's more urban. He's a delivery rider. He sees delivery riding as a quick and easy source of income in a market stifled by youth unemployment. But he believes that motorbikes are expensive or difficult to buy outright. So he's entered into a work and pay arrangement, like many of his friends, where they found somebody else to buy, and as they use the bike, they pay for it over time. His major concern is fuel prices keep rising and it's eating into his livelihood. He treats the bike as his own and he pays for maintenance costs. And he's frequently stopped by police who are asking for things like his license. He doesn't have insurance and he's unaware of e-mobility solutions. He carries a load and he typically travels around 150 kilometers per day on his motorbike. He gets paid by mobile money and he gets information from WhatsApp groups and riders associations. And then the final persona I want to share with you is that of Amma. She's a retail shop owner, and especially since the COVID pandemic started, she's seen an increasing number of her customers who want to shop from her via her Instagram page and get the goods delivered. She doesn't own her own car, but she uses Uber. She would like to invest in a car. She thought it was affordable, but she wouldn't ride a motorbike because she's worried about safety concerns. She can ride a bike, but she told us that using a bike is an indication of social status. So it may not be, she doesn't feel it's aspirational enough for her. And her main mobility need is commuting as well as delivering to her customers. She's concerned about delivery riders' presentation. So she prefers to work with Glovos and Bolts where the riders are branded. And she's also concerned about rising fuel prices. She's heard about electric cars and electric bikes, but she's worried about their reliability and who does the maintenance. So overall, she is interested in the environment and would like to make Ghana cleaner. She regularly banks her money and she gets her information from church. So bearing in mind these three different personas is what we use to design our business model. What do these personas have in common? There were kind of four key themes that came out from these particular ones. I think it was really interesting for me to see how big a market opportunity there is for people who currently do not own any transport means themselves. I think that even from a rural all the way to an urban area, regardless of affluence, there is still a huge demand for people to have their own kind of more independent transport. And the second was everybody had a need to carry loads. When we spoke to users, even people who were commuting still had a need to carry load. But what we saw was in rural areas, the loads that people needed to carry was more than in urban areas. Thirdly, was how people get trusted information. And most people were part of associations, be it farmers groups or be it church groups. And so when we're talking about how we communicate e-mobility, it's really important not to miss out these community-based organizations because they could serve as a really good channel to build trust and position e-mobility in an aspirational and affordable position. And then finally, affordability and reliability is key. So when we spoke to users all over the country, people had a perception that e-mobility was intrinsically expensive, even though they didn't have a view of exactly what price they were going to pay. So moving on, the next stage for us was really understanding feasibility. And this is where we actually introduced the technology. When we were talking to people and interviewing people in the beginning, when we started talking about e-mobility, most people hadn't actually seen any e-mobility solution at all. So we actually thought about refining our problem statement to say, is there an opportunity to introduce a made in Ghana e-cargo bike that is affordable, aspirational, and can be easily maintained? And from here, we actually went out into the community. We had an e-cargo bike and we did a co-creation session where we just let people ride it. So this is a short video of us out in the community, letting people use the bike, talking to people. We went to farming communities, we spoke to local entrepreneurs, we went to rice farmers, we spoke to delivery riders. We let people actually ride the bike, ask us questions, and we found out about preferences. One of the things that really stood out for me when we were testing in the community was that both men and women were really interested in trying the e-cargo bike. And we are really conscious when we're designing to make sure that our approach is very inclusive from a gender perspective, but also from an affluence perspective. Hey. Brilliant. So from the time that we spent in the communities getting feedback, we had this as our first kind of prototype. And the first thing that came out was the traditional kind of front-loading cargo bike. Users didn't actually like. They didn't like having to navigate the bike from the front. Particularly women, they found the bikes quite heavy. And what they said was they would prefer a back-loading bike. So the next stage for us was to look at the prototype, build out prototype 2. So what we have here is a locally sourced kind of mountain bike. We converted it to be an electric bike, and then we fitted a cart. And people liked having the load carried at the back. And they also liked the idea of having the cart to be detachable, so they could use when they wanted to and take off when they didn't need it. When we came to show the cart with the backloaded cart with the e-conversion bike in more urban areas, users said actually their concern wasn't carrying that big a load. What they actually wanted was space to carry load on the bikes, but they wanted speed, because when you go in more urban areas, you have more A roads, you have more pressure on delivery. So we did another conversion with a higher capacity motor. And then what people told us was we actually needed better brakes and better suspension. So our final prototype, which is where we are now and what we've gone to market is that users, really liked having an e-bike even without a cart. But what they wanted was for the bike to be longer so that they could fit a box, a carrying box, like a delivery box at the back of the bike. Which is this prototype. And then the second thing that we got in terms of feedback that users told us was around aspiration, that they wanted a bike that looked cooler than a normal traditional motorbike. So this is why we went with one of the more retro kind of e-cargo bikes. So the final area that we had to look at was really around viability. And viability really looks at the enabling environment around going to market with a technology or a proposition. And there were 4 key areas or 4 key questions that kept coming up when we were talking to our users about a viable business model. And the first one was, how much does a bike cost? The second was, how do we charge bikes? The third was, what happens if the bike breaks? And the fourth was, do I need a license to ride? And so from our perspective, from the business model and talking to users, what we realized were that people really want bikes that they can use, but didn't necessarily want to be able to, didn't have the capacity to pay for a bike up front. A lot of finance institutions also weren't open to just jumping in straight away to finance individuals. So the model that we've decided to adopt is a subscription model, because people like associations, they like to be part of a club. So a subscription model for people who are associated either with existing delivery companies or with associations like government workers and those kind of things. So we're actually for $5 a day through an association or through a business, an individual will be able to lease one of our e-cargo bikes. Secondly, how do we charge the bikes? We realized that range anxiety is a really prevalent thing in the minds of most of our users, and we didn't want people to be charging on their own. So what we've decided to do is to set up a network of our own charging stations, leveraging existing solar infrastructure that we've identified across communities. So we do a battery swap system. Thirdly, what happens if the bikes break? In current beta, we have 2 workshops where we will be providing regular servicing for bikes that are being subscribed to. But in the long term, we're also looking to partner and train local entrepreneurs who will be part of a maintenance network for e-bikes. And then finally, do I need a license to ride? And I think this has probably been one of the most interesting questions, because obviously it's a bike, it's not a motorbike, it's not a car. So from a legal perspective, no, you don't need a license to ride. But when we came to actually insuring the bikes, we actually realized that there is a big gap in the market for e-mobility insurance. And in order to make claims, currently the insurance that's available in the market is for traditional motorbikes, and to make a claim you would need a license. So these are some of the areas that we are also discussing and trying to understand what is the innovation that needs to happen in terms of financial services to support the bikes to be insured, and then what are the discussions we also need to be having with local government to make sure that we are compliant from a regulatory and a safety perspective. So overall, that's really where we've got to in terms of journey and sharing and user insights. And I'm really open to any questions, and thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Valerie. Brilliant. And thanks for the clip. I actually was in Ghana only 2 weeks ago, and when I heard the music, I was remembering some good times we had. As said, if you have any questions to Valerie, please put them in the question answer box. We will have a Q&A session together with her and Omondi in the end of the session, so a bit more interactive, so she can respond then. Okay, so fast forward from Ghana to Kenya. Our next speaker is Omondi Oko. He's the lead business development and innovations manager at Rehab Victoria, as well with the trade name Vetu. And he's responsible for piloting a range of innovative solutions in the topic of energy for productive use. So for example, electric mobility. And so Omondi has a vast experience with coordinating research studies. He's managing technical partners and was the manager for all the go-to-market and testing strategies at Vetu. In 2018, he completed his master's in business administration and strategic management at Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Development in Kenya. And Omondi, so the floor is yours now. I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks, Mara, for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, from wherever you are. So Mara has talked about me briefly. I work for Vetu. Vetu is a social enterprise in Western Kenya, and maybe I'll very, very briefly talk to you about what we do, then maybe quickly jump into business modeling for e-mobility, our experiences to say. So essentially, we're a social enterprise. All our profits we plow back into the company, but we are a subsidiary of Siemens Foundation. And as you see there, benefit society normally comes first to economic interest. So we have 3 main business verticals. We-mobility, which I'll talk about. We-power, we have a couple of lanterns for fishermen, which they use at night, and also we-water. We do water purification from the lake, purify it, and then sell it back to the community. Additionally, there are still a number of projects in project stages. We've not listed them out as verticals. We are working on cold chain value processes, a couple of activities there, and also looking into e-agriculture. So very, very fast, we have right now 12 offices. I am in Homa Bay. I was looking for markers so that I can show you Homa Bay is, but as you can see, the offices are around the lake. This is very strategic for us because our core product is the lanterns for the fishermen. And all these dots that you can see along the lake, we have offices that are solar powered. So with the excess energy that we realized that we had, we decided to use more products, and that's how the idea of e-mobility came in. Yeah, so basically the question is why e-mobility? We did realize that we have charging networks, potential charging networks with excess power, up to 165 kilowatt. This was last year. Right now, we've added about 24 kilowatt system to it. And then we decided to look for solutions that we can test and could be suitable for the local communities within which we work. So we looked for partners that are able to work with us in introducing these innovations to the local community. Yeah, so we looked for innovative products that are targeting off-road and can be used to enhance the other verticals that you have, like the transportation of water, also looking into first and last mile connectivity. So for Way 2, we are not manufacturers of these innovative products. We work with a couple of technical partners. Like you can see the bike there is from Opibus. We've also done some work with Borderwork and also Anywhere Berlin, testing both technical and business proofs of concept for those bikes, and as well to build an ecosystem around the EVs. We worked with the JZ and P4G to fund a couple of studies just basically to allow us to understand better the environment where we're working, what are the gaps and whatnot. So we did look at the potential environmental impact of EVs. How can we quantify the greenhouse gas emission savings? We looked at the social economic impact, potential impact, because we are targeting to have about 30 bikes from Opibus, 20 from Borderwork, some more from Anywhere Berlin. We knew this would need a lot of trained manpower in the local community. So we did a training needs assessment to identify what is required to be able to service EVs, what is the current market in the community where we work, and how do we bridge that up. And also we looked at charging stations. Well, I'll talk about this again later, but we needed to know how can we optimize the circular kind of movement that these bikes have in order to strategically place charging stations and be able to still make a profit from that. And also, we looked in depth into different business models for EVs, and this is maybe what I'll talk about at length today. At the moment, we're working on developing a management information system just to manage the bikes, and also still looking at the issue of additional charging and swapping stations. Yeah, so for the business development, we did a couple of studies to help us better understand the culture, the ownership trends, and a couple of other things. And we did realize that, well, obviously the riders here, they use the bikes mainly to transport people, but there's no difference between somebody opting to use the bike for a cargo or for transport. So whatever he can carry, if it is a passenger, it's a load, they will always carry. And 72.5% of riders own their current bikes or are in the process of owning their current bikes through pay-go systems. This is very important because in the way which has been structured, we do not have structures for microfinance. So we only have options to lease, for instance. So we only had a market of about 18% to actually work with. Yeah, so 13% of the riders acquired the bike through direct purchase. And for the riders, durability is one of the things that they really look at when they're looking to acquire their bike. So durability is one, and then the fuel consumption was a second one. In terms of current transport challenges, we all are aware of this right now in Kenya. The fuel prices are very, very high, while the commodity is also very rare at the moment. So it was a very big challenge for them. We did have a lot of riders last year around October. This was probably the first time that the price of fuel started really, really hiking. So a lot more guys started coming on board to use the e-cargo bikes. So perception on e-mobility, this again, we did try to find out. It was a new concept at first when we started having the cargo bikes on the road. It was like a miracle. People could not imagine that a bike could actually run and carry passengers without using fuel, and it is noiseless. So we used to have crowds all of us, and people trying to figure out what is happening there. So they like the idea, and most of them would think of this as keeping up with the trends. They are trying to adhere to the modern world. But they were reluctant towards the e-bike purchase because they do not trust the batteries. Maybe they thought the charging systems were very complex, and there's just an overall lack of knowledge on how e-mobility actually work. And again, remember we talked about 72% owning their bikes. So they will still prefer to actually pay to own, not to lease. And we did try to understand a bit of their financial background and realize that most of them did not worried about having small loans, but they fear not being able to pay if the loan sums become too big. And the community here, about 75% of their overall income either come from fishing or from riding bicycles. So if you're a rider, 75% of income would come from riding a bike. If you're a fisherman, then 75% of your income would come from fishing. So it is like the major income earner for most of the individuals here. Oh, okay, so when we started all this, we sat down in an office somewhere and came up with several assumptions. Some of these were right, some of them were very wrong. One was that EVs would be able to save money for the riders, and this was true. We thought if you do a leasing kind of business model, everybody will rush to get on board this. But this is me talking. If somebody gives me a BMW today and tells me, when you're tired of that BMW, just come back, I'm going to give you a new one, I would take that option every single day. But apparently, this is not what actually happens. Most of the riders here, I don't know if it is a cultural thing or something, they actually prefer to either buy directly or pay to eventually own that bike. So as well too, we have these dreams of having a shared economy where the battery would be used across different devices, but the riders actually wanted to own every single thing. Due to reduced operational costs, riders will be able to save more. So this is true in a way, and also not true in a way, because in as much as we're creating new solutions and giving them new a solution to their problems, we realize that EVs actually create some new pain points. For instance, in the absence of charging stations network, the riders would have to come back to our hub where the batteries can be swapped to be able to swap the batteries. So if you're going from, assume a triangle from point A to B, and then you need to get to point C, but the batteries are only at point A. So if you get to point B and you don't have enough power to get to point C, you have to drive back to point A. So that is already lost in business. And then the transport back from B to A, it's power that you're consuming, but you're not earning. So it becomes a problem. So at the end of the day, when you're doing the business model, you have to think about this potential pain point that has been created now. We thought EVs would reduce fuel costs by at least half. This is true on paper. In reality, EVs have a couple of things that you need to think about when you model. For instance, what is the weight carried by the EV? What is the distance being traveled? Sorry, what is the speed at which the bike is traveling? What is the gradient of the road that is traveling? What is the terrain like? So all these things also affect the level of fuel consumption, but not to the degree that it affects energy consumption in a battery. So on paper, it is true that EVs reduce the cost of fuel, but in reality, we cannot directly model and say, if you're paying 100 shillings for petrol for X kilometers, then you're going to be able to spend 50 shillings for the same kilometers. It's a bit different. And also, we also assume that most of the riders on the ground are licensed by NTSA. NTSA is the National Transport Safety Authority for Kenya. This is not true. Actually, most of them do not have licenses. Most of them do not even own, they do not have the papers showing ownership for the bikes that they're having. because they don't do the transfer from the dealer into their own name. So there was a bit of a problem there. For way two, you wanted to bring EVs. Anybody you see having an EV, you would assume or you know that this person is actually licensed to ride. So we are targeting only licensed riders, and we realized that this was a bit of a problem getting this. So I think I've talked about the EV limitations, ownership models, use pay to own models preferred, influence of terrain cargo, battery range limitations, lack of EV skills implementation. Yeah. So we did a bit of work again with corporates. We did a study. We were only able to work with one corporate within Western Kenya. It was easy because they're also in the energy space or battery space, so they have their own charging stations. This was like a low-hanging fruit for us, and so it was not really easy to say that these are very important learnings that you got from here. So for the other corporates, I think you could on board. It was a bit tricky because the decision-making organs for most of the corporates here are based in Nairobi, and if something is to happen, they probably start working from Nairobi before they're really pushed to the grassroots. So it was not so easy working here. So there was some interest, but then also have to think about what is the business model for them. If they give them the bikes, they have to come to our stations every day. And if they charge from their stations, are their offices optimized for EV charging, for instance? You find that some of the offices have basic connections, what you call level 1 charging stations. They've not been optimized in terms of circuit breakers, dedicated lines to charge batteries and things like that. So this was a problem. And then the distances that they covered here are much, much longer than the bikes could actually sustain. And probably they do maybe field visit or client visits carrying 2 people plus mechanized. So the power consumed also is much, much more. So it was a bit tricky. What we learned from this is that for corporates, let's say Uber Foods, for instance, where the bikes have a specific location where they come and stop after every delivery, and you're able to set up charging stations. There are a number of bikes and they go out on a frequent basis. It's easier to work with such an institution because at any point, if the distance to be covered, which can easily be seen on an app when a customer is requesting for delivery, it's much more than the bike can go, then you can easily switch to a different bike or carry an extra battery or something like that. In communities here, the distances are much, much longer. So how do we apply these learnings basically to increase penetration? So we need to adopt more ownership models versus use models. Our approach basically was a use model, but realize that many people here, they prefer ownership models. So partnerships with companies that have microfinance structures might actually work. But then again, we need to think about if you're doing ownership model for the two-wheelers, do we do ownership for the bike only and the battery remains a property of a company, let's say like Way2, or do we do bike plus battery? And if it is bike plus battery, are there enough charging stations that have been optimized for EVs in the conventional way? And again, at the end of life of that battery, how is it disposed of? And can it serve a client long enough for them to get an ROI? So we need to think about all those questions. We also need to substantially increase the battery range for the EVs because as it is now, let's say a 2.1 kilowatt battery, the manufacturer says about 70 kilometers, but these are lab conditions. When you use them, actually, you find it was about 42 to 55 kilometers based on the parameters I talked about earlier, speed of the rider, weight of the rider, and the cargo, terrain, the gradient, and all that. So the third one, different business models to suit different users. It's not really one use fits all kind of scenario. We came up with 3 different payment options at the end because we realized that one does not serve everybody. One does not serve everybody. These are different scenarios. We had a rider, physiotherapist, who just go and visit his clients, and he understands the path that he needs to go. So we cannot charge this person on energy consumption, same as somebody who runs around every single day, carrying cargo and passengers. So we had options where you'd pay a flat rate for both bike and battery. So it doesn't matter how many batteries you use in a day, you've paid a flat fee. So this allows guys who do a lot of commercial use for the bikes to be able to be within their comfortable range, and allow people like the physiotherapists to actually use like a single battery in a day and still able to serve the customers. And again, the kind of culture in the community I work was a bit different. For the flat rates, we had two options. You either pay a higher flat rate for 5 days in a week, or you pay a lower flat rate for 7 days in a week. If you do the calculations at the end of the week, they're still almost the same amount of money. But because most of the riders, they earn daily and they want to expense daily, and sometimes they don't work 7 days in a week, they see that paying the 7th day if they're not working is a problem. Yeah, if you look at it, it's actually basically the same amount of money. But if I don't work on day 7, I don't have enough income to give you on day 7. So they prefer to pay the higher premiums on day 1 to 5, and then day 6 they don't pay anything. Then the day 7 the rest. So we have to think about all that and just put it into consideration when thinking about business models. And then charging stations network. We did quite some work trying to understand battery consumption, energy consumption patterns for the riders, and the routes that they travel. So we had GPS trackers on the bikes, including ICE bikes, just to see what is their movement patterns like. And then for those guys who basically, like in Homa Bay town, they do circular kind of movement. This is like our target market now, because if you do long distances, then we might not be able to serve you. Putting up charging stations is very, very expensive. So after understanding the battery consumption patterns for the riders, you work out how many batteries do you need to put at station A, at station B, at station C, and are there strategic points so that you have like a Homa Bay circuit network supporting each other. If batteries you run out of batteries at station A, you can supply from station B to station A. So something like that. So on paper, we developed two circuits, Homa Bay circuit and Beta, and we worked with GIZ and a couple of other bodies to develop actually satellite hubs where we could actually charge to support guys who are choosing a longer route. And then when they get to the next hub, they're able to get more batteries there. Yeah, so all this is still, we've not actualized all of them. A lot of it is still on paper and is still being developed further. And also the thing that you've seen is that at some point, we too will not be able to actually service all these 50 target bikes. And we need to impart more skills in the community, create more local, support local businesses to actually be able to service and earn revenues from these bikes. Yeah, so that is all from me and from me too. Looking forward to your questions.
Thanks, Omondi. Great. So lots of learnings, as you can see, from the last years. Valerie, do you want to come back on with camera as well? Because we already have one question for the two of you. And of course, it's about money, who would have thought. So Alejandra would like to know, like, let's say the question is to Valerie, but I think for Omondi, it's valid as well. How did you choose the price tag of $5 per day for the leasing option? Did you have a chance to validate the price with users already? So I think that's for Valerie. And then Omondi, I think you can maybe afterwards just explain what were actually the price points you tested at V2.
Yeah, I think for us, it was quite interesting through our user discussions. Like I mentioned, many of our, most people indicated that they didn't own the bikes, that they were doing a work and pay arrangement. So we managed to benchmark what people are typically paying through their work and pay arrangement. And from there, we kind of broke it down to, okay, how would you like to pay? Is it daily? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? And then from that, we came to the $5 a day. So it really was very a consultative process, looking at both riders and commuters, benchmarking what they typically spend daily for transport.
Thanks. So Omondi, how did you define your price points?
So one, there's a standard range for bike leasing in Homa Bay and in Beta. So this is where we started off with. Because we're not trying to sell the bikes or have them do pay-go, we introduced a deposit fee for because you want to feel that people are serious and they're willing to go and actually make money with the bikes. So initially we put up a deposit fee of 50 USD. We realized this was pretty high initially, and we after some time we moved to reverse it to 30 USD. And then again, for the bike leasing option, we did basic calculations. The riders, those who don't own their bikes or paying to own their bikes, they lease from other people. So they pay a daily rental fee of about $3. So if you calculate this for a week or for 6 days, it comes to between $15 or $18. So this was our starting point. And we worked with this number to actually see if we can fit it. So the savings for the riders now, this is now the fuel versus the partner discussion. This is now where we had a bit of calculations to do because the different bikes consume differently, not so different in terms of consumption. The different brands like Bajaj is preferred because the consumption is very low. So we worked with this. We tried to estimate how much fuel they spend in a day and how much batteries do they need in a day and to work the figure around that. So we did have 3 options. One, you could pay 450 shillings, Kenya shillings per day for 5 days. This was a flat rate. So if you give us 450 shillings, you don't need to pay for the battery. You can have as many batteries as you want. Or you give us 320 shillings per day for 7 days. This is the one that I talked about that culturally, some people kind of didn't like it so much. Or you give us 200 shillings, about $2 per day per bike. And then you pay 70 Kenya shillings for every battery swap that you have. So it was just an issue of the rider understanding what his power needs are, and then picking up the right business model for them. As I said, we benchmarked on the rental fees in the market at the moment, and then we tried to work around fuel consumption costs and our battery costs.
Thanks, Omondi. Thanks, Valerie. So, if you have more questions to them, please put them in the chat box. Otherwise, I'm going to ask questions. From all the experience and from all the data and you generated, what would you say was the most surprising finding in the business model exercise you've been doing so far? Let's start with Valerie.
Most surprising. That's quite interesting. I think probably understanding how much people are actually spending on transport on a daily basis. Like I said in my presentation, most people aren't owners of transport, and we did quite a bit of analysis understanding how much do people spend on, let's say, public transport, how much are they spending when they buy a car, and probably the most interesting finding was understanding how much people are spending on a daily basis and who's financing that, and to realize that there isn't so much formal finance available for transport. And therefore people are spending a lot of money on old vehicles that are, really detrimental for the environment. So there is really an intrinsic demand for better quality vehicles at a better price point. And I think, and also seeing the difference in terms of men and women as well. I think we spoke to one lady and she was saying that, she doesn't drive, but she shares her husband's car loan. So even from a gender perspective, seeing that there is a lot of a burden around transport, but there weren't many solutions in the market.
So Omondi, I just got another question, and so maybe we can combine that. So what was surprising for you? And then there's a question as well for those prepared to lease to own. So the ones that are interested in pay-go, what was the purchase price and the cost of financing? So a little bit more about the finance, but I would be really interested as well to know what was the most surprising learning for you from the last 2 years.
I kind of already mentioned it. I think I'm still amused that people actually prefer ownership models vis-a-vis use models, because For me, in my mindset, if I'm allowed to use an EV without the initial purchase cost, and whenever this EV breaks down or develops a fault or whatever it is, I can simply return it and get a new one. I find it so appealing. I wouldn't understand why somebody would prefer to do trying to own an EV or an asset and things like that. Basically, it frees up your capital to do other things, and yet you can still earn from this asset that you don't have to buy. So that totally knocked me off because it really reduced the market percentage that you could work with. So this became down to about 80% or something. And we kind of struggled to actually push up these 30 bikes at a point. Yeah, I can see the question from Celeste. For those prepared to list your own offers, the purchase price and the cost of financing. So the price for, because you worked a lot with the bikes from Optibus, the price for Optibus bikes on their website now, it starts from 130,000 shillings. But we did not explore any option for leasing to own. For us, because of the structures that we have, it was purely used models, leasing or rental. Yeah, so and like that. But I've seen people like David from Mcopa, and I don't know who else will be able to maybe respond to that question, the cost of financing and things like that. But for us, as Celeste, we never did the numbers for cost to own because we are not in a position to.
Yeah, maybe as well a comment. So they are normally specialized lease to own operators. So for Eastern Africa, there's Tugende. I think in Nigeria, there's Max and Chi. So yeah, if you're interested in that, you can get in touch with us and I can try to put you in direct contact. We do actually have one more question, and now it's on batteries. What is the performance of the batteries? How long do they last? Well, that's an interesting question, either load cycles or maybe as well the distance. And how much does it cost to replace? How easy is it to replace the batteries? Maybe Omondi, we're starting with you this time. I think you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, the cost of batteries. Let me just pull that question again. Performance of the batteries are replaced. So the performance of the batteries depends on its ratings. At the hub, we have a 1.4 kilowatt battery. We have a 2.1 kilowatt battery, or 4.6 kilowatt battery. So the one we tested substantially was the 2.1, and taking into account all these factors that I talked about, the riding habits of the rider, the distance, the load they're carrying, the gradient, the terrain, you could get about 33 to 55 kilometers of a single charge. For lab testing, probably get about 70 kilometers of that battery. So you'd probably need to, I don't know if there's anybody from Bodak or somebody.
I don't know, you're breaking a bit. Maybe you can try without the camera. Now it's good. Let's see.
Yep. Okay, fine. So I was saying the batteries will probably cost you about 50,000 to 70,000 Kenya shillings to replace. Right now, it is not really easy to say with certainty how the batteries would last, because there's a lot of improvements being made on a daily basis on performance of the batteries, the energy density for different batteries. So most manufacturers normally say about 2,000 recharge cycles. But again, it really depends on how you use it. If you use it commercially, like a commercial bicycle rider, it's probably going to wear faster than if you use it for commute. You're going to work in the morning and back at home in the evening.
Okay, so Valerie, do you have anything to add? And then we're already coming to the end.
I think for us, everything we're trying to understand how the behaviors of the riders will really influence the battery life. So at the moment, we're really at a stage where we're in beta, we're testing a lot of bikes with a different variety of batteries with riders, and we're kind of monitoring the telemetric data, trying to understand even points in the city that people need to charge more regularly, and just make sure that we have enough data around, how the riders are riding. So the different terrains, north versus south, urban versus rural. We even have like GoPros on the bikes as well. So we can be monitoring like braking, how people are braking and accidents, those kind of things. So I think at this point in time, I wouldn't have a definitive answer. I think a battery to replace is probably, let's say, around $400. But we're just at the stage where we're trying to understand how a battery swap network would work by really analyzing the behavior of riders.
Thanks a lot for those replies, and we're already coming to an end. I think what got quite clear is that it's really business modeling, like trial and error, like having testing hypothesis, then seeing is the user behavior actually in that way, and as well as technology behavior in the way that you expect. So we know business modeling is really interesting. That's why from the projects at V2, there will be a short report. It's like 8 to 10 pages, so quite short, where we will publish some of these testing data for you to learn. The project that Valerie operates in is just starting, so I think there will be a lot more interesting learnings and presentations or reports coming. Because I said, of course, but we try to protect as well the IP of the social ventures and the companies we work with. There is, of course, some, let's say, general learnings and some data that we're really happy to share. And yeah, so if you got the invite to this webinar directly, you're most likely in our mailing list. If you didn't and you want to be in the mailing list to not miss any future webinars or reports, just get in touch with me and we're more than happy to sign you up. So yeah, have a nice afternoon or evening, depending where you are. And yeah, so bye from Germany. Valerie or Mondi, do you want to have a last word?
Yeah, I think there was one last comment in here from Ricardo around carbon offsetting as well. And I think that's an area we haven't embedded into the program that we would love to. So if there's anyone on the call today who also has expertise in how we could potentially offset capital costs with carbon offsetting, that's, an area of interest that we'd be open to having discussions. So, but overall, thank you so much for listening. It's been a really lovely session.
Yes, I'm grateful from my end. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch. We're always happy to share. And if you're in Western Kenya at any point, just look me up. Thanks.
Actually, like one more point on carbon, like together with P4G, we there was a small study on the potentials of carbon offsetting for electric mobility projects, not for ICE bikes. So if you're interested in that, they're publicly available. Just let me know. I share the link with you and happy to connect you. Well, thanks a lot and have a nice afternoon. Bye.